Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Monitoring and Improving School Climate with Student Surveys. My name is Evie Blott, and I'm a staff writer at Education Week. I cover school climate, discipline, social emotional learning, and child well-being. Today's webinar will focus on the best ways to track students' perceptions of their school's environment and how to use that data to make improvements. A growing body of research recognizes that when students are more engaged, they're less likely to misbehave, and have better academic outcomes when they feel safe and supported at school. And school climate has gotten some extra attention lately because the Every Student Succeeds Act, the replacement for No Child Left Behind, lists school climate measures as a possible variable in state accountability systems. Today we're going to learn about a new online tool released by the U.S. Department of Education that allows schools to track and store school climate data. We'll also hear about how the Austin School District developed its own school climate survey and some of its findings. Our guests are Lindsay Lamb, an evaluation analyst with the Austin Independent School District, and Joaquin Tamayo Jr., the Director of Strategic Initiatives for the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education at the U.S. Department of Education. Before we begin, now's a good time to review some of the technical aspects of today's presentation. Please check the audio setting on your computer, as well as your speaker volume settings if you're having any audio trouble. If you're still having issues, please see our detailed audio troubleshooting file available in the Handouts folder at the bottom of the console. There are also some other icons that open some additional feature panels on our webinar console. You can read about today's speakers in the bio panel, click the Handouts panel to download a copy of today's slides, and follow the conversation about today's webinar on Twitter using the hashtag EWWebinar. Please submit your questions for the guest speakers in the Ask a Question box above the chat window. Finally, an on-demand archive of today's presentation will be available in the next 24 hours. Both the archive and a free-to-download version of the PowerPoint slides will be accessible through edweek.org. Now I'd like to hand the presentation over to Joaquin.
Great. Thank you, Evie. Really appreciate the opportunity to present this afternoon to your audience and to my colleagues across the country in education and in all sectors concerned with the education and welfare of our youth. I'm happy to share an overview of the new Ed School Climate Surveys and our School Climate Improvement Resource Package that we released in late March of this year and that are now available for free to every single state, school district, and school in the country for the express purpose of improving school climate, improving school safety, student engagement, satisfaction in every single school and classroom across the country. So in terms of the presentation that I'll offer right now, I'm going to review how we have, for the purposes of this survey and our School Climate Improvement Resource Package, have defined school climate so that we have a baseline to work off of. I will overview the surveys themselves and some screenshots of what a school can expect to see when they utilize the survey portal and the survey tool. I will also review the School and Climate Resource Package and the pieces of the package that are and will be available for access now and in the coming months, and then happy, of course, to entertain questions and answers following the presentations. All right, so let's jump into it. And I should just say, for background context, I'm a former high school teacher from Los Angeles, California with the AISD. Also a former high school principal in both New York City and here in Washington, D.C. And I'll start this presentation by saying that as a school principal, I believe the most important data I ever used to plan meaningful and lasting improvements in my school was the Learning Environment Survey that the New York City Department of Education conducts every year, which is essentially a school climate survey that we used quite intensively to plan improvements above and beyond almost any other metric over the course of the 4 years that I worked in New York City. And so I'm a big believer in the power of school climate surveys and in the absolute need to really pay close attention to student, faculty, and family and parent perception as we engage in the work of school improvement over time to improve educational attainment, health, and wellness among our children. So in terms of school climate, we have a definition that is included in one of our new resources, our quick guide on making school climate improvements, and I think it's actually appropriate to go ahead and read the whole thing, even though you see it on the slide, so that we have some time to think about this and reflect a little bit. So we define school climate as reflecting how members of the school community experience the school, including interpersonal relationships, teacher and other staff practices, and organizational arrangements. School climate includes factors that serve as conditions for learning and that support physical and emotional safety, connection and support, and engagement. A positive school climate reflects attention to fostering social and physical safety, providing support that enables students and staff to realize high behavioral and academic standards, as well as encouraging and maintaining respectful, trusting, and caring relationships throughout the school community. Now, I took my time to read that because we've found often in discussing issues related to school climate across the country that when people think about these issues, typically they think about one or two of the big, the various factors that I've articulated in this definition, and they're not really thinking comprehensively about physical safety, emotional safety, engagement, connection, support, trusting relationships, you name it. It really is a sort of comprehensive understanding of all of that and the interplay and intersections between all of those issues that is school climate. So it is quite complicated, but using the right kinds of tools and measurements, individual practitioners, principals, teachers, school district superintendents can make real and lasting improvements, appreciating the definition, and then also utilizing a specific, meticulous protocol to measure and to improve climate, and that's what we'll be discussing today. So what is the problem that ED is trying to solve with these new resources for schools and districts across the country? So I'm going to highlight four problems that we have seen in data over time and that we have been working on in different ways to address. One of those problems is the overuse of exclusionary discipline in schools. I won't go through all the stats that are there on the slide, but it shouldn't go without saying that we are suspending and expelling far too many of our students across the country every single year, and disproportionately students who are Black, Hispanic, students with disabilities, and students who are LGBT identified. And so we've identified this along with our colleagues at the Department of Justice as a major problem and impediment to improving educational attainment and graduation rates across the country. And we believe that a focus on school climate can help schools address the overuse of exclusionary discipline. Secondly, we're very concerned about data that tells us that educators themselves, principals, teachers, are struggling under the weight of difficult choices in the education context, so much so that research on conditions for learning is often disregarded. There is ample evidence, solid research, that when we pay attention to conditions for learning, when we pay attention to not only the physical environment, but also climate and culture in our schools, those are all the ingredients that add up to educational attainment, that add up to being able to realistically hold all of our kids to the highest standards, both academically and behaviorally. The research is there. It's been there for a very long time. It continues to grow. But given the pace of the day in school, given the multiple challenges and burdens that our educators face from multiple stakeholders and at multiple levels, it's sometimes really hard to focus on the research. And so we really have worked to make sure not only that these resources are deeply research and evidence-based, but that they're also easy to access so that we can help educators lessen their burden a bit, have a comprehensive tool to do this in an easy and accessible fashion to deal with this problem. Thirdly, despite rating their own schools well, most principals and teachers are struggling under the weight of their own negative working conditions. And I mention this because our school climate surveys not only include surveys for students, but also for teachers and for non-instructional staff, including school administrators and principals. So these surveys are designed to collect 360 comprehensive information from stakeholders across the school community, including students, teachers, non-instructional staff, and administrators, as well as parents and families. So it's really important in terms of improving school climate that we do focus not just on the children, but also on the adults who are in charge of supporting our children. And finally, many of our students report being disengaged from school and do not view school as a supportive or enjoyable place to learn. If folks on the webinar today are not familiar with the new Gallup student poll that was released earlier this year entitled Engage Today, Ready for Tomorrow, I deeply encourage everybody to become familiar with that resource and to really appreciate what the survey has found. A survey of almost 1 million students across the country, so quite a large sample size. Found about how they're reporting their experience in school. And I think actually I should read a couple of these stats just because when I read this information, I was quite shocked and concerned about how our kids are faring in school. And the survey found last year, this is 2015 data, that over half of students in grades 5 through 12 reported not being engaged in school. 29% are not engaged and 21% are actively disengaged. Further, only 42% reported feeling safe at school. Only 28% reported having fun at their school. Only 39% reported that adults at their school care about them. And only 55% reported that they had at least one teacher who makes them excited about the future. I think any educator on the webinar today would agree that these are really, really troubling and concerning statistics that we have to turn around if we're going to make progress in our schools. And so our school climate survey does test for a number of these issues, including students' engagement and excitement about learning. And so we really hope that judicious use of these resources will enable educators to meet the challenge that is being posed by our children. So given the problems that we're trying to solve, given our need to make all of our schools safe and supportive, not just physically safe, but also supportive of all of our children, the Department of Education, with our Office of Safe and Healthy Students and our National Center for Education Statistics, developed and released this past March 2 resources. One, our online school climate survey portal, the ED School Climate Surveys, as well as the web-based School Climate Improvement Resource Package, or SCIRP, for short, to enable the use of the survey, but also data analysis, stakeholder engagement, and implementation of comprehensive school climate improvement processes. So we wanted to make sure that we not only enabled practitioners to generate data, usable data, but then also to have a framework and a process to be able to use that data to make real and lasting improvements. And those processes were based on work that we've done with grantees across the country and research and evidence-based practices related to school climate survey implementation, so that there was a really valid and well research process that any educator could engage in and produce reliable results. So as a quick overview of the school climate surveys, just in terms of background information to understand how this all started, in early 2013, following the tragic events in Newtown, Connecticut, the Department of Education, taking the lead from the White House, developed a priority to improve safety and support in our nation's schools. And so we took that charge here at the department, and with our Office of Safe and Healthy Students, worked with the National Center for Education Statistics and the American Institutes for Research to develop a nationally valid school climate survey and resource package that would enable the use of that data in schools. The school climate model, so the survey itself tests across 3 domains: engagement, safety, and environment. And under each domain, we also test across 13 different subgroups. So those include cultural and linguistic competence, relationships, school participation, emotional safety, physical safety, bullying and cyberbullying, substance abuse, emergency readiness and management, physical environment, instructional environment, physical health, mental health, and discipline. So there are a number of questions that relate to each of these subgroups within the 3 domains. and wrapped together really do produce one of the most comprehensive school climate surveys that is available in the field today. So right now, our surveys are designed specifically for middle and high school students. We do not yet have an elementary survey, just so folks on the line know today. We have surveys also for parents and guardians, for teachers, and for non-instructional staff, including principals and school administrators, as I said previously. So there are actually, in fact, in the portal 4 surveys, one for students, parents and guardians, teachers, non-instructional staff. The surveys can be administered at the school level, at the district level, or even at the state level. The survey allows for the local storage of data and access for authorized users only. The Department of Education, no federal agency collects this data. The data that is generated through this portal belongs to and can only be accessed by states that use this, districts, or individual schools, if individual schools choose to do so. There are multiple surveys that can be run at the same time, at different times, through different devices, laptop computers, iPads, cell phones, you name it. It's a very wide-ranging technology. It's open source. And during the data collection, administrators can see how respondents are finishing, how outreach is going in terms of parent surveys, for instance, and can generate survey status reports as they're administering the surveys. So the survey is designed to be as flexible and accommodating to school processes, school days, calendar events, whatnot, so that it allows states, districts, and schools to plan effectively to maximize time so that it doesn't become a disruptive process. It actually is value added in terms of engaging the school community in a process to collect their feedback, to collect information, to communicate that we care about how they feel and how they're engaged in the school community so that we can make improvements moving forward. So this is a screenshot of what a user at a state, district, or school level may see when they go onto the portal, the different functionality of the survey portal itself to generate reports, survey results, uploading information, data collection. So this is what the main page looks like for survey administrators. Another really important feature of this survey is that a state, a school district, or an individual school can actually include user-generated questions that are specific to the local needs and issues of that school, that district, or that state. So you can add to this survey questions and then run them for answers with your stakeholders and your students. You can simply use the questions that are already built into the survey, but we wanted to make sure that this was a well-known feature because there are a number of issues that surface in states and school districts and in local communities that they want to learn more about, that are specific and local issues. For instance, a number of communities have expressed interest in testing questions related to symbolism and mascots to see student and staff and family perceptions around things like that. Questions related to transgender students, for instance. A number of issues that educators are deeply concerned about can be addressed through the user-generated questions feature of this survey. This is a screenshot actually of an iPhone image, so you can see that we've developed it so that it can be used on mobile devices. A growing number of schools are using mobile devices as learning and teaching tools, so we wanted to make sure that this survey could run well, not just on a laptop computer, but also on a mobile device. So it is iPad and other tablet and mobile phone accessible for maximum use. Not only in the school building, but also, of course, at home. Parents and students can run this at home as well. So again, we've tried to design as much accessibility into this portal as possible. In terms of the reporting of the data, we can report what you can generate from the survey portal are item level frequencies, so the number of respondents for validity by item. You can also generate domain level scores, so by those 3 domains, as well as topic, the subtopic scores within those domains. And the reporting tool can compare by school, by grade level, by race, and by gender. So there is a survey portion at the beginning of each survey asking for basic demographic information from the respondent. It does not collect personally identifiable information like names, addresses, email addresses, none of that. So to protect privacy not just of students and their families, but also of teachers and administrators who are filling out these surveys. But we can disaggregate based on that information. And scores within the next year, beginning in September of 2017, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a few minutes, will be able to be compared against national benchmarks. And so again, just a little screenshot of what a subgroup scale reporting might look like for any one of those, for any particular domain. And you can see, you can disaggregate by gender, you can disaggregate by grade level, and then you can also disaggregate by race. And if you want to just take a quick look to the right side of your slide where it says Hawaii Native or Pacific Islander, where it has the double cross, that's what would come up if there isn't sufficient numbers of students who identify within that subgroup to produce a reliable sample size and reliable data based on that sample. So just to know that those protections and those functionality is already built into the survey, so it does require that you do assess a certain number of students, by question, by subgroup, in order to produce reliable information. So we released the survey in March, and in March of next year, we'll be collecting data from a large sample of schools across the country, voluntary sample, middle and high schools across the country, so we can develop national benchmarks that will be built into the reporting system beginning in September of next year. So the survey is available now. Schools can run it and generate reports. What you don't have in the reports is any indication of, for instance, what a score on a question of 400 means. There is no national benchmark, but we can run the survey now and use that information. And next year you'll have an indication based on these samples where the sort of the national benchmark is for each of the domains and subdomains. So now turning to the School Climate Improvement Resource Package, or SCIRP. So like I said before, it's not enough to just have numbers and data. We have to have a resource and a way to use that data in a way that actually results in meaningful improvements in school climate. And so we've developed a whole suite of resources. The first resource that is up now that we released along with the survey in March is what we call the Quick Guide on Making School Climate Improvements. And it's a short resource that can get any school administrator, any teacher who's interested in this work up and running immediately on how to run the survey and then how to begin to use the data to think about how to make improvements across a number of dimensions of school climate. The goals of the SCIRP, number one, to support states, districts, and schools in improving climate via a set of 5 overarching activities. 2, to help states, districts, and schools interpret the school climate survey data. 3, to provide strategies, resources, and examples of how to do that and how it's been done across the country in various places. And then finally, to provide online access to a range of resources that can help a variety of schools, middle schools, high schools, and districts across the country. In terms of what informed the SCIRP, the latest research and practices in the field, we're working with our colleagues at the American Institutes of Research and our National Center for Safe Supported Learning Environments. We've developed quite a lot of resources, as I'll get to in just a moment, that are all research and evidence-based. And within the resources, links and research references so you know exactly where this information is coming from. We also leverage our grantees here at ED who have used school climate surveys and actually run the beta versions of the school climate survey and the school climate resource improvement package to test and to refine. So everything that we are releasing has been tested across schools across the country, or by schools across the country. We've received lots of feedback. We've made improvements over the last 2 years in development during this project. And so we're really excited about the strength and the robust nature of all of these resources, including the range of approaches that folks took to improve school climate, because there is no one right way to do this, lessons learned, as well as success stories, which are important to keep us motivated. So you know what these 5 activities are in terms of the school climate improvement process. Number 1, monitoring and evaluating school climate improvements, planning for school climate improvements, engaging stakeholders in the school climate improvement process, collecting and reporting the data, and choosing and implementing school climate interventions. So these are the overarching 5 sets of activities, and each of the resources support practitioners in working through each of these activities. So our quick guide in terms of what the contents of the resource package, and it's growing, I will say, available right now is the quick guide, which was released in March of 2016. Coming very, very soon are a full reference manual, action guides for a range of stakeholders, meaning you're a teacher, this is what you do with the data. You're a parent, this is what you can do with this data in terms of advocating for improved school climate at your child's school. If you're a student, this is what you can do with this information. And if also, of course, if you're a principal or your non-instructional staff. So very specific stakeholder specific action guides to engage the entire community. A data interpretation guide to help everybody understand how to interpret and act on the data. In the fall, we'll be releasing a whole suite of online modules. So these are interactive online activities that will take about an hour each, that will run stakeholders through a number of these activities, including interpreting the data, engaging your stakeholders, implementing a process. And so we're trying to hit multiple modalities, so it's not just written information, but it's also interactive experience as well to engage as many people as possible in this important work. One of the innovations of our SCIRP includes an assessment for school district administrators as well as school building administrators that will link them to resources specific to the challenges that they have. So for instance, if a school runs a school climate survey and finds that it has a big problem with bullying and it has a big problem with physical safety at the school, instead of having to rifle through the entire resource manual, by taking this assessment and identifying what the specific needs and challenges are, that will link that user with the specific research and the specific resources to address that subtopic or that domain. So we're trying to provide very quick, very user-friendly, accessible information when people need it on the spot, so that we waste no time in making the kinds of improvements that we need to see in our schools. So we're really excited about that resource. It will be coming in early fall, an online assessment that will enable quick reference to the right resources when people need them based on their data. And then finally, pointers for improving school climate based on that assessment. So, giving people a framework, giving people a roadmap on how they can get started, particularly with, challenging issues like bullying and dealing with safety. We felt that was also important. And something I think I didn't mention related to the survey itself, the survey can be administered multiple times during the year. So we know that a number of school districts and schools are already looking to administer the survey at least twice per year, once as a kind of a pre-survey at the beginning of the year, and then again at the end of the year, and some people are going to do it in the middle of the year, so they can see, hopefully, improvements over time as they engage in a process. And so in New York City, when I was there, we only surveyed our students once a year at the very end of the year, and that was, I felt like, a limitation. We didn't have that beginning of the year baseline to work from, and so this survey can be administered anytime during the year, whenever it's planned to produce data at the beginning, in the middle, at the end of the school year. However, it's going to support folks best. So once again, we've already released our quick guide. This summer, we will be posting on our website for the National Center for Safe Supported Learning Environments the reference manual, the data interpretation tools, action guides, and the self-assessment. And then in the fall, we will be posting those online modules for interactive professional development. So that's the end of my presentation. Really appreciate that I had the opportunity to share all of this information. The links for the surveys and the SCIRP are there on your slide right there, and happy to answer anybody's questions following this survey, this webinar at my email address, joaquin.tamayo@ed.gov. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Joaquin. And we will, I won't get to all of your questions, but we'll ask some of them to both of our speakers at the end. But first, I want to give you a chance to hear from Lindsay. While Austin hasn't used this exact survey module, they've developed their own way of measuring school climate. And I'm going to have Lindsay turn it over to her to tell us about it.
Great. Thank you, Evie, for inviting me to speak today. It's an honor. And thanks, Joaquin, for providing such a wonderful overview of what school climate is and why it's so important to measure. As Evie said, my name is Lindsay Lamb, and I have been working in AISD's Department of Research and Evaluation for the past 7 years. And I've been asked to talk about AISD's Student Climate Survey, which I've had the pleasure to manage and evaluate throughout my tenure in the district. More specifically, I'm going to talk about the history of AISD's Student Climate Survey, including challenges we have encountered along the way, how we continue to develop and refine the survey, as well as our timeline for survey administration, and research we have conducted with the survey and how schools have used our data. So as a district, AISD started looking into assessing student climate survey because our superintendent and school board leaders at the time felt like we needed a way to evaluate student success beyond academic achievement. And as I'm sure many of you know, and thanks to the research that Joaquin shared, student climate has been shown to be a strong predictor of academic achievement. So our office was then tasked with the job of figuring out how to measure school climate. And we searched for an existing survey that measured all areas of school climate that we found in the literature that seemed to be most important, but no one survey seemed to fit our needs. Some of the surveys that we looked at and have continued to look at are the Tripod Survey, My Student Survey, the Gallup Student Poll, Panorama, Harris Student Poll, the High School Exit Survey of Student Engagement, just to name a few. I'll also mention that almost every year a new national survey, like the one we just saw, comes out, and we're asked to review it and see if we should use that survey or continue using our own existing survey. And almost every time this comes up, we create an item-by-item crosswalk between our survey and whatever the hot new survey is. But year after year, we have found that our items actually closely match those being asked on these other surveys. Now, occasionally we will add an item or a construct, but for the most part, the basic structure of the survey has not changed drastically over the years. In looking for surveys, another important factor for us was whether or not the survey was translated into Spanish. And this is because a large population of our students speak Spanish as their primary language. And unfortunately, we noticed that many of the surveys that we've looked at do not offer adequate translations into other languages. And we've even noticed some incorrect Spanish translations on some of these surveys. So at the time, when we were first beginning this process, we just couldn't find an existing measure that really fit our needs. So we decided to create our own survey, and we began by piloting some items, and we translated the items internally. And we did several rounds of piloting to fine-tune the survey before it was rolled out district-wide in 2003-2004. All right, so currently we have 7 subscales that are assessed on the Student Climate Survey, and some of these subscales mirror what Joaquin talked about in terms of engagement, safety, and environment. But we do have some other surveys that we administer in my department that also assess parent perceptions of school climate, staff perceptions of school climate, student SEL skills, as well as student substance use and safety, and a high school exit survey. But for now, I'm just talking about our Student Climate Survey. This year, we've added some items to our survey to assess students' SEL skills. And we did this not only because SEL is offered at all of our schools, but also because AISD is part of the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, or CASEL's, Collaborating District Initiative, which monitors students' SEL skills. And these items that we added were based on some developed by Washoe County School District. And we're excited to see how students' responses to these items relate to other outcomes like our other SEL skills survey, student attendance, student achievement, and discipline, just to name a few. So the items that we added are: I use ways to calm myself down, I don't give up even when I feel frustrated, I know what people may be feeling by the look on their face, I get along with my classmates, I say no to friends who want to break the rules, and it is easy for me to talk about my problems with the adults at my school. We also included a new subscale measuring school connectedness, which didn't actually add any new items to our survey, but rather grouped together some existing items that matched items on the school connectedness survey and the adolescent health survey. And these items are: I'm happy with the way my classmates treat me, adults at this school treat all students fairly, it is easy for me to talk about problems with the adults at my school, I like to come to school, I feel safe at my school, and teachers at this school know who I am. So without further ado, here is an image of what part of our survey looks like. And in terms of participation, all students in grades 3 through 11 are asked to participate in the survey, which currently contains 39 items and response options that range from a lot of the time to never with a don't know option. There have been several changes to the scale over the years, and not only did we find that students had a hard time with an agree to disagree scale, but we also found that the more concrete we can make the options, particularly for younger students, the better. So for example, younger students had a better understanding of the scale with a lot of the time to never rather than a strongly to agree to strongly disagree scale. We also found that using pictures helped our younger students. So as you can see here, we use a picture of a clock on the survey as a visual representation of the scale. And something new that we did this year was to create one form for both our elementary students and our middle and high school students. And in the past, we had separate versions for elementary school students and secondary students because the wording of some items differed. And we didn't want to show the clocks on the secondary student version of the survey, but to ease the burden on our school district, on the campus leaders administering the survey, and for our own office, we decided to just create a one-paper version of the survey with English on one side and Spanish on the other side. We did offer other languages, but those were available by request, but just to give you an idea of some of the other languages we translated the survey into. This year, we also offered it in Arabic, Burmese, and Vietnamese. And additionally, we have been pushing schools to complete the survey online because it allows us to tie students' answers to other district data. And this year we had 33 of our 121 schools participate in the survey online, and we're hoping to have every single school do it next year, so fingers crossed. So now I'm going to give you a sense of how we work to refine the survey each year. Each fall, we conduct a factor analysis and a reliability analysis separately by school level to determine if any item should be reworded or removed from the survey. Each year, our factor analysis indicates that we have 5 distinct factors that map to our original 5 subscales. And this year, we also had a factor emerge that grouped our new SEL items together. Additionally, when we have new items, we look at the percentage of students who say don't know, as well as examine the responses by survey language and survey type. And by survey type, I mean online or on paper. And this year, we also examined the percentage of students responding positively based on their ethnic group. In terms of our survey's reliability, our estimates are consistently stronger at the secondary level than at the elementary school level, with alpha levels ranging from about 0.62 to 0.87 across our subscales. Now, estimates at the elementary school level were lowest for the SEL subscale. Although reliability estimates around 0.60 are low, they are consistent with reliability estimates at the elementary school level on other similar surveys. One final note about reliability estimates. As I mentioned earlier, we computed these estimates across different racial groups, but also across English and Spanish speaking students. And we found that reliability estimates were typically higher in English than in Spanish, particularly at the elementary school level. And this will be something that we will consider as we plan our survey items this fall and work to ensure that all students understand the questions and have a chance to accurately voice their opinions about school climate. As I mentioned earlier, each fall we look at our factor analysis and reliability analysis and work with other stakeholders to determine if any new items should be added and if any items should be removed from our survey. We administer the survey in the spring so that students have more time to form an opinion about their school. We work really hard to get the reports published by the end of the school year so that schools can use the data as part of their campus improvement plans for the coming year. We also use the data in state and federal reporting, grant development, and ongoing evaluations of programs like social emotional learning. More recently, we have examined the data by student group, like student race and gender, and level of economic disadvantage, and our district's ongoing conversations about equity and education. And this is an example of what our campus level reports look like. A complementary district report is also available online. All campus and district level reports are posted online and are available for everyone to see. And schools tend to discuss their students' responses when planning their campus improvement plans for the following year. And I always get phone calls asking me when the reports are going to be published because schools are so excited and anxious to see their data. And as you can see, we report each item by subscale and include responses over time, as well as responses at that school level. We also compute an effect size to determine if the percentage of students who respond a lot of the time or sometimes has improved or declined over time. And this is the arrow that you see after the item, I feel safe at my school. Over the years, we have examined how students' ratings of school climate relate to several outcomes of interest, such as academic achievement, attendance, and social-emotional learning skills, just to name a few. We have found that students' ratings of school climate, particularly behavioral environments, are positively related to student performance on our standardized test, which is STAR here in Texas. And more recently, we have examined how students' ratings of school climate relate to our social emotional learning program. And I should mention that I'm also the evaluator of AISD Social and Emotional Learning Program, so I have a vested interest in combining the two things that I work on. And to date, we have found that after controlling for students' baseline ratings of bullying, which is an item on our student climate survey, secondary schools with higher SEL integration had more favorable ratings of students at my school are bullied than did schools with lower SEL integration ratings. We also found that secondary student ratings of several school climate items have improved more at schools with 3 or 4 years of SEL experience than at schools with fewer years of SEL experience. And these items are adults at this school listen to student ideas and opinions, adults at this school treat all students fairly, I feel safe at my school, and students at my school are bullied. I just wanted to say thank you all for taking the time to listen to what I have to say today. You can check out our Student Climate Survey reports on our website and also search for the reports I mentioned that use the School Climate Survey in our ongoing evaluation of social and emotional learning. And to do so, you can go to our website and search for SEL in the publication list or search for my name. Thank you so much.
Thank you to you both. We have a lot of questions, and unfortunately, we won't be able to get to all of them. If you all have some more technical questions, particularly about the department tool, I encourage you to dig into the tool first and then use some of that contact info that Joaquin shared with you. But one of the most general questions that we had come up quite frequently in those you submitted, and Joaquin or Lindsay, you can answer this, is that a lot of folks said students feel like people ask for their input, but they don't always students don't always recognize that their input is being used. And so folks are asking, how do you share this data with students, and how do you encourage them before they take the survey that this is actually going to mean something?
That's a good question, and that's certainly, I'm sure I heard more than a few times from my own students after the Learning Environment Survey, so whatever happened to all that information we provided with you? That's a concern, and that's one of the issues that we try to address through the School Climate Improvement Resource Package, and which is why we included action guides for students, for parents, for everybody who's going to take this survey, so that they're engaged in this process. In the activities for principals, for instance, there's specific questions about how they're engaging their teachers, how they're engaging their students, how they're engaging their families, so that it's an intentional process that not only informs the community that this data is being collected, but then how it will be used, what the results are. It's never good to leave people hanging and then sort of incent schools to fall into this vicious cycle where trust isn't built because this big campaign about informing school climate, and then nothing happens, or there's very little information about what happened after the survey was administered. And so we address that specifically in our resources, and would hope that enables administrators and teachers to have open conversations with students and families so that everyone is fully aware and feels engaged in the process.
Yeah, and Lindsay, can you tell me a little bit about how Austin addresses parental privacy concerns, and if you have any students who opt out of taking the surveys?
So if students take the survey on paper, it's completely anonymous. We have no way of linking students' responses to any identifying information about them. If they take the survey online, we do have identified information, and we can link it to other existing data resources, but no student is required to take the survey. So if a student doesn't feel like taking it that day, they certainly don't have to. And in terms of parent permission, I believe since it's a district-initiated survey, if parents have any question about whether or not they want their student to take that survey, they can contact our Office of External Research, and they help with that. but students are not required to take this survey.
And Joaquin, with the tool that you all are making available, we hear a lot about opting out and testing. We also hear a lot about student privacy concerns. How do you recommend that schools address those issues?
So in terms of student privacy, so again, this survey collects no personally identifiable information from students, names, addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, none of that. It does ask for gender, race, ethnicity, grade level, or school level, for instance. I should say, though, that there is capacity, or there is functionality for a school district to link the data with student indicators. That said, there's lots of disclaimers and information in our resources that say that if a school or school district does decide to use that functionality, they have to abide by all of the protections in the Family Educational Privacy Rights Act so as to not violate that in terms of student privacy. Further, if there are questions, specifically those user-generated questions that a school may or a school district may add to the survey, if they're really assessing a very small number of students, if it doesn't satisfy the requirement for the number of respondents to generate a valid score against that question, it can't be generated. So again, another way to protect student privacy. The last thing we want is for students to think that their candid feedback is going to be misused, discounted, or used for some kind of retribution against them. So we really thought long and hard about how to make sure that doesn't happen, though being able to disaggregate information, understanding that different students of different genders, races, backgrounds will respond to questions in a different way. And so that information is built into the survey. It's included in the resource package in terms of making sure students' privacy is protected, as well as parent privacy, and I should say teacher and administrator privacy. This is really intended to allow for candid feedback that is privacy protected, to allow for the most robust use of the data.
Could you foresee if a state chooses school climate as its other indicator for accountability under the Every Student Succeeds Act? Could you see this being a tool that they might use to measure that?
It is a tool that they can use to measure it. I would say that a state should think, or even a district, should think long and hard about how they do that. Understanding that the higher stakes they put on any particular measure, the less reliable that measure becomes over time. And we certainly wouldn't want our school climate perception data not to be reliable, because it'll be that much harder to make the improvements that we want to see in our schools. But it is, we leave it up to states and school districts in terms of how they want to leverage this kind of data within their systems of accountability and support. We have no specific recommendation on what they should do in that regard, but the data are valid. It's research-based, research and evidence-based questions, and so it really is up to states and districts in terms of what they decide to do with that data.
Okay, great. And do you have plans to develop a survey tool for elementary school students?
We're looking into that right now. We haven't announced that we're going to do that, but we're considering options for expanding this to include pre-K to fourth grade.
Okay, great. And Lindsay, are there any specific things that Austin schools do with this data? Any examples that you can tell us about?
Yeah, we use the data in a lot of reporting and monitoring, district monitoring. So I mentioned the campus improvement plans. That's something that each campus reviews and looks at to plan the coming school year. It's also used in district leadership academies. So district leaders will look at student climate data and just kind of see the lay of the land. We use it in various program evaluations. I mentioned the social emotional learning program, as well as grant writing and to comply with grants. And also more recently, we're using the data, or beginning to use it, in some work we're doing in terms of equity in Austin ISD and looking at gaps, achievement gaps, and looking at climate as one way to address these achievement gaps and how students respond to these items based on student ethnic group. And one thing I didn't mention, but some analyses that I've looked at, we found that our African American students had less favorable responses on almost every single item compared to their white and Hispanic students, and that's just something for us to look into a little bit further as we not only plan our survey, but just as we think about equity in a broader picture.
Let's see, I'm sorry, I'm trying to identify the next question. Joaquin, tell us a little bit more about when the national benchmarks will be created and how a school might use that data. And if I'm a school, if I'm ahead of the national benchmark, is that great and I should say everything's great? Or what kinds of attention do I need to do year over year with this information?
That's a great question. So we will be recruiting. Our National Center for Education Statistics is in charge of this process, and so they are this coming fall and into the winter will be recruiting the sample of 250 middle schools and 250 high schools to run the survey. They'll be doing that next spring. That data analysis will be conducted so that we can develop those benchmarks for each question and each topic and then each domain that then can be embedded into the report. So as quickly as the data is fed into the portal, those reports are automatic. And I should have said that earlier, that the report generation is automatic. There is no time lag between the submission or uploading, I should say, of the data and running those reports. So again, then that's again part of the local data ownership piece of this resource. That said, I would caution. It's always nice to have a benchmark to know if my physical safety subtopic score at my school is a 350. Well, from 0 to 500, the scale, what does 350 mean? It's hard to know how good or bad that is without some kind of benchmarking. I should say, though, that a school district and a state now can run the survey and develop their own benchmarks based on their survey, the average or median score for each of those questions, subtopics, and domains. So individual units or users can do that at a state or school district level. It'd be hard to do that at a school level. But that said, we hope that the benchmarks are more guideposts as opposed to use for other types of readings. I think a statistician would say, benchmark is a sort of a helpful indicator relative to a sample, but that's going to be a national sample. It's not a state sample. It's not a district sample. So you never know where your local benchmark might actually be, and how your school may be, more or less safe or more or less engaging than the school down the block. So we're going to develop the benchmarks because I think people like to know sort of where they stand. But really, at the end of the day, it's not enough to have those benchmarks. And even if your school or any school is beating those benchmarks next fall, there's certainly going to be areas for improvement. And we hope that with that data, with that information made more robust by the benchmarking, schools and school districts and states will fully invest in the entire school climate improvement process, so that all stakeholders are engaged, so that it is a process over time and it isn't a one and done kind of thing, and that it becomes part of just how the school works and how teachers teach and how students learn and grow into safe, healthy, productive adults. And so we're going to offer that, but with lots of caveats, because it really is about the process, not just about getting the number.
Great. Well, hey, and I'm sorry that we can't get to every question that our audience has asked, but I thank both of our speakers for a wonderful presentation today. I'd like to remind you that if you watch today's session presentation again, an on-demand archive will be made available through edweek.org within the next 24 hours. You can also visit edweek.org to find articles that explore today's topic, including a lot of posts on my blog, which is called Rules for Engagement, if you want to check that out. Thank you so much to everyone who attended, and thank you so much, Lindsay and Joaquin, for your wonderful presentations. Have a great day.
Thank you.